Okay, so this week is Parshas Vayishlach, and we're going to start a little from last week's Torah portion before we get into this week's Torah portion, because last week we spoke about Yaakov going to Lavan's house, but we didn't really get into the rest of the parsha. There's so much in each week's Torah portion. We didn't get into how he got to his house, how he got married to Lavan's children, Rachel and Leah, how they were changed, they were exchanged, and he was tricked, and how he lived there for 20 years, and he worked there 7 years for Rachel, but he was tricked into Leah, 7 years for Rachel, and 6 years for the cattle that he was leaving with. And then once he had the cattle, and once Yosef was born, he decides it's time to leave, and he leaves. He escapes from Lavan's house. Lavan comes chasing after him, but he makes peace with his leaving. And then finally, this week's Torah portion, it says he's on his way, and he hears that Esav is now coming to meet him. Esav's coming to greet him. And Esav's not coming to greet him, but Esav is coming with 400 men ready to fight him. Because remember, the whole point of his leaving was to escape, because Rivka told him, leave, because your brother is very angry, let his anger subside, and then, once his anger subsides, you can come back. I'll call you and you should come back. But it seems like Esav is still so angry, and Esav is out to greet him, comes out to meet him with 400 men ready to wage war, and Yaakov presents him with all different presents instead. He also prays to God, and Esav, there's no confrontation. Okay, we're going to talk about that this week. And after that, he goes on his way, and he settles in Shechem, and this is where we see the abduction, the kidnapping of his daughter Dina, and her rape by Shechem, which we're going to talk about as well. And that's what this week's Torah portion is about. But in order to understand this week's Torah portion, the encounter with Esav, as well as the abduction and rape of Dina, we need to go back to last week's Torah portion, to where it all starts, to where his whole family starts. And I want to talk this week about the women in Yaakov's lives. And who are the women in Yaakov's lives? There's obviously Rachel and Leah, and also Bilhah and Zilpah, the maidservants, as well as his daughter, the only daughter that's mentioned, which is Dina, and how each of these come about to get to where we're up to this week. So first of all, last week's Torah portion, he decides to marry Rachel, but he's tricked, and instead he's given Leah. And we learn a custom from the wedding, from what was done in that time, and that is, what do we do at a wedding? The veil. We put the veil on, because the veil was on Leah, so Yaakov did not know that it was not Rachel, but that it was Leah. And in fact, it says that Yaakov gave Rachel, he suspected that Lavan might trick him in this way, so he gave over to Rachel certain signs, to have these like secret signs between them, so that they can exchange these signs under the chuppah, so he'll know that it really is Rachel. But Rachel had such pity for her sister. She said, how can I let her be embarrassed like that? She's going to stand there in front of everybody, and she'll be so embarrassed that...
And she was the oldest.
And she was the oldest. So I'm going to give her the signs, even though that might mean that I'm not going to marry my intended, my love, the person who's been working for me for 7 years, who we both love. I'm not going to have him. But this was Rachel's tremendous self-sacrifice and empathy for her sister. So the veil is worn nowadays because we learned that this was worn by Yaakov's wedding, when he married Leah instead of Rachel. So the question is, why are we wearing the veil at a wedding today when we don't want that to happen? We do. Now we pick it up. The custom is, okay, you pick it up to make sure you're getting the right one. But what is the idea of wearing a veil? What is the idea of this whole veil? The idea of the veil is saying that Yaakov thought he was getting Rachel, but he really got Leah. And sometimes when we marry, this is what's happening. We think we're getting something.
Yes.
But we don't really realize the whole package. We don't realize the whole package deal of this someone. So we think we're getting this Rachel, this perfect person who's so beautiful on the inside and the outside, this tzaddik characteristic, as we're going to see she's called. But we end up with Leah, who might be a more struggling personality, who might have weak eyes, who might have a lot of tears. And what we're saying as we get married is, I am marrying this whole person. I am marrying this whole person. Nobody is perfect. Everybody has different parts to the package deal of who they are. And that's what we're saying with the veil. I'm marrying this person who now might be beautiful, but who knows if in the future she'll be beautiful. Now she might look this way. Who knows if these characters, what's going to come out from our relationship and down the road. And I'm marrying this entire person. I'm accepting you as your whole self. I might be thinking I'm getting Rachel, but I realize that I'm getting Leah as well, and I'm marrying this whole person. And that's really an important principle when you're getting married, to realize that you're not just getting the perfection that you think you're getting, but you're accepting and you're loving, and you're going to grow with this entire person, the good, the bad, and the in-between, okay? And that's what he is, that's what the idea of the veil is. So when we talk about Rachel and Leah in last week's Parsha, when he sees Rachel, he sees she's beautiful, she's a beautiful person, inside and outside, spiritually as well as physically. And the name Rachel comes from a word that means an ewe, a sheep. That's very tender, and it's very cozy and cute and white and perfectly white and so beautiful and so cute. And this is what Rachel was. She was this white tzaddikas. She was this personality that was this really righteous personality. Everything about her was like inside and outside was the same. Everything was very self-actualized. There weren't all these fragmentations to her personality. It was what you see is what you get. This personality that was a tzaddik kind of personality that was so in tune with her abilities, her potential, and actualizing her potential. And that's what Yaakov fell in love with. At the first moment that he saw her, he saw this and he fell in love with her. On the other hand, we see that Leah is a little bit of a different personality. She's a more complex personality. It says Leah's eyes were weak from crying. Leah's personality is, the word Leah means one who is weary, one who is tired. Mm-hmm. And the point of Leah's life was that, you know, some people seem to just have everything, like they're doing the right thing and they're just overcoming all their challenges, and it just seems so steady and easy. Leah is the person who's climbing the ups and downs of life more. She's weary, she's tired from the whole journey of life, the whole journey of going up and back, and the whole pulling this way and that way. Leah's a sinless person. We don't see that she sinned at all, but her personality is more the Baal Teshuvah personality, the Baal Teshuvah personality versus the Tzaddik personality. The Baal Teshuvah personality is somebody who has gone up and down in life, and is, because of the ups and downs in life, they found the path that they needed to take. But it wasn't easy. It was a twisted path. It was twisted, it was turning, it was a difficult path that they took, but they got to where they needed to get to. We know that it says the place that a Baal Teshuvah stands, even a tzaddik cannot reach that place. Meaning a Baal Teshuvah, because of the fact that they've sinned or they've gone through the twists of life and they've come to that realization, that genuine realization of where they want to be, they've reached a certain level that even the tzaddik, who is perfect, who is righteous, who never sinned, is not on that level. Because it's specifically through the difficulties and challenges of life and the ups and downs, and specifically the downs in life, that they were able to pull themselves up. And that's a very special quality that the Baal Teshuvah has. Even though we say a tzaddik is a completely righteous person, sinless person, but there's something about the life of a Baal Teshuvah that because of the choices that they made, because of the lessons that they learned from their past, that even the tzaddik cannot reach that level. But it's definitely a more complex level. It's a deeper level, it's a more complex level. The tzaddik personality doesn't have temptations, like it doesn't even tempt him. It's like, sometimes people look at the cake and they're just not even tempted. And like those people are like, come on, And other people are looking at it and they're tempted by it and then they're holding themselves back. And that takes a lot more restraint, the people that are, right? So this is the difference between the Rachel personality and the Leah personality, the tzaddik personality type and the Baal Teshuvah personality type. And we see this rift between Rachel and Leah. Really, it wasn't just their own unique personality type, but this was a personality characteristic that went into their descendants as well after them. And there was a rift between them and their descendants. So we see that Rachel and Leah, these two personality types have representation in Bnei Israel, in the children of Israel. How do we see that? We see, for example, the prototype of Rachel and Leah. The child of Leah was Yehuda, right? Yehuda, and he was the leader of the Jewish people. It says Yehuda repented for a long time after the deeds of Tamar. He repented for doing it. He publicly repented. He publicly expressed how he was doing something wrong, and he repented afterwards. Yosef was the prototype of Rachel. He's the child of Rachel. He was the oldest son of Rachel. And we see this steadfastness. He was the leader in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. And he was alone. He didn't have his family. Yet the strength of character, even in Egypt, he became who he became, and he did not fall at any point in time, despite the temptations that were going on there, despite the immorality of the place, despite the fact that he was alone without his family. He remained steadfast and this very charismatic kind of personality type. Now, the rift we see between the children of Leah and the children of Rachel, we see that Moshe was from the tribe of Levi, which is from the children of Leah. He was the one that took the Jewish people out of Egypt, right? And he took them out, and he's hoping to take them into the land of Israel, but he doesn't get to take them in. It was Yehoshua, who was from the tribe of Benjamin, who was a child of Rachel, that actually takes them in. We see that there was always a Malchus Yehuda and a Malchus Yisrael. The Malchus Yisrael was, there was a rift between these two kingdoms, Malchus Yehuda and Malchus Yisrael, throughout the generations. We see even in the final end of times, there's a Mashiach ben Yosef. Someone always, Barbara, I think you always mentioned Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, which could be a spiritual Mashiach, but Mashiach ben Yosef prepares the world for the coming of Mashiach, and Mashiach ben David is the one who's actually there to build the Beis HaMikdash. So we see this rift throughout the generations, going throughout the generations between Rachel and Leah. Now, Yaakov sees Rachel, this personality type of this tzaddik, this personality type of this very charismatic individual, this perfect individual, this individual that's very self-actualized. Everything happens to her the way it's supposed to go, very in a straight line. And he's attracted to her, and he wants to marry her. Now, Yaakov, also we're told, there's Yaakov, and then Yaakov has as well another name. What was the other name that Yaakov has? Yisrael. And in fact, it's in this week's Torah portion that he gains the name Yisrael. Why does he gain the name Yisrael? It says that he left the camp. He went to get back he went to pick up some things that he had forgotten across the river, and this angel of God is fighting with him. And this is the angel of Esav. This is the angel of Esav that's fighting with him. And this angel of Esav fights with him, and he fights back until the morning, until finally the angel of Esav has to leave, and he says, bless me. And he blesses him by giving him this additional name, Yisrael. If we look at the name Yaakov and Yisrael, the name Yaakov is Yud and Akev. Yud represents the neshama, the soul. It represents that soul part of us. Akev means heel. So Akev, the name Yaakov, is the person of Yaakov, is the person who has the soul, is only the heel of the soul is in him. See, we all have souls, but the soul has a lot of different levels to it. And the soul that really we can relate to is the part that's in us, the lowest part that's in us. But there's different levels to the soul. The high parts of the soul kind of are above us. We're not even really accessing those levels of the soul. So the level of Yaakov was the level of this personality that can feel this lowest part of the soul. That lowest part of the soul is in him. Yisrael, on the other hand, is a greater personality. And this Yisrael personality is somebody that, the word Yisrael is li rosh. I have the head, meaning the head of the soul even is in me. The head of the soul, the highest part of the soul, the part of the soul that's the most spiritual part, the strongest part of the soul, even that part is something that I'm accessing. So this Yaakov personality has this Yaakov part and this Yisrael part. The Yaakov part, it's well, we all have kind of this split personality. Like there are times that we're feeling, here it's just very divided, but there are times that you feel very connected and very spiritual and very strong in your beliefs, and there are times that you don't feel as much, right? So the Yaakov part was the part that had a certain, obviously he was a great tzaddik, he was a great individual, but the Yisrael part was an even greater person, an even greater. Yaakov had this lower level of soul. Yisrael had this higher level of the soul that was in him. And again, remember, this is years after Yaakov is working in Lavan's house that he then merits to get this name Yisrael. He then merits to become, through our lives, hopefully we all develop and we all become the people that we're supposed to be. So he starts off as Yaakov, but then he becomes Yisrael. So,
what is the meaning of the heel, though?
It means the heel part of, just like the heel is the lowest part, so the heel part of the soul was in him.
I understand, but is there any significance about the heel as opposed to another part of the body?
The heel is the lowest part.
That's the lowest part?
That's the lowest part, yeah. It was also because he held on to the heel of Esav. Yeah, that's why that's on a simple level, that's why he was called Yaakov, because he was holding on, meaning he was trying to grab some of the powers of Esav. Exactly. He was trying to grab, and we're going to see what does it mean he was trying to grab it. So when Yaakov is going to get married, he goes to his father-in-law's house, Laban's. So very good. Good question, because that's exactly the point. That's a very good question. Yaakov is going to Laban's house, and why was Leah crying? Why does it say her eyes were so weary and her eyes were so tired and she was so tired? Because it says people would say to her, Rivka has 2 sons and Lavan has 2 daughters. So Rivka's oldest son will marry Lavan's oldest daughter, meaning Rivka's oldest son is Esav, will marry Leah, and Rivka's youngest son, Yaakov, will marry Lavan's youngest daughter, Rachel. And when Leah heard this, she would say, well, who is this? Who is this Esav that you're telling me? Because remember, they're living far apart. She didn't know who he was. And they would say, oh, he's a very evil man. He's a terrible man. He's wicked. He's immoral. He goes doing all kinds of immoral things. And when Leah heard this, she would weep. And she said, she would cry to God and she would pray. And she would pray and say, God, why is it that I have to fall into the hands of this Esav? Why should I fall into the hands of Esav? Please help me. Please stop this. And Rav Huna says, great is prayer, that we see prayer is so great that not only did Leah annul the decree that Esav was supposed to marry Leah, because this is what was supposed to be in the heavenly sphere as well. Not only was this decree annulled, but look who marries Yaakov first. Leah, right? Her prayer was so powerful. Not only did she annul the decree that she was supposed to marry Esav, but more so, she marries Yaakov, and she marries Yaakov first. That's the power of prayer. That is what prayer does when we pray. Now, when Yaakov comes to Lavan's house, and he works 7 years for Rachel, and then he's tricked, and that night it says, Rachel gave the signs to Leah because of her tremendous empathy for Leah, and that night Yaakov marries Rachel, thinking it's Rachel, but it's really Leah. Yaakov marries Leah. And it says the next morning he looks at her and here she's Leah. And he says, what went on? How is it that I kept calling you Rachel and you kept answering to me as if you were Rachel? You tricked me. And she says to him, well, I learned from a very big tricker. Who did I learn from? Well, this is even worse. This is even more personal. I learned from you.
Oh.
You tricked your father. You tricked your father. He said, I'm giving Esav, is this Esav my oldest? And you said, Ani Esav b'chorcha. And the commentators say, Yaakov said it, Ani, I am, Esav b'chorcha. Esav is your eldest. He kind of tried to stop to make it. But really, he tricked his father. He says, I am Esav, your eldest. She says, who did I learn from? I had a very good teacher. You. You think I'm the tricker? What about you? You tricked. And this is according to the Midrash. So what was Leah really trying to say to Yaakov? She was trying to say to Yaakov, Yaakov, when you tricked Esav and your father and tricked him into giving you the blessing, and you said, I am Esav, your eldest, what were you doing? In a certain way, you kind of became Esav. You became the role of Esav. Esav was supposed to marry Leah. You now became that Esav who now marries Leah. And what does it mean that Esav was supposed to marry Leah? When we talk about Leah, it says, was a very outgoing personality. She was this Baal Teshuvah personality, meaning she was supposed to ride the ups and downs of life. She was supposed to go on the ups and downs of life, the journey of life. And that was what her personality was supposed to be. That was what her spiritual profile was supposed to look like. And that's why she was supposed to marry Esav, who also was going a lot in the day. He had a lot of potential, but he was not really using his potential. He was really falling to a low level. So Leah was supposed to marry Esav because hopefully through her abilities of being the wife, a righteous wife of Esav, she could pull him out. She could elevate him. She was the personality. Rachel was way beyond him. Rachel was this tzaddik personality. But Leah was the person who could ride the ups and downs of life, go through the roller coasters of life, and hopefully through relating to that aspect of him, she was supposed to help him, to schlep him out, to kind of bring out his good potential of who he was, that high spark that Yitzchak saw in him, that high elevated soul that he was, but who had fallen to such low depths. She was supposed to be able to pull him out of that. But Leah didn't want that. Leah said, I don't want that role. I'm scared. I'm scared I won't be able to do it. I'm scared that that mission is too hard for me. It's not something that I feel like I have the power to do. And that's why she prayed and prayed and prayed. And God listened to her prayers, and God changed her destiny and made her to marry Yaakov. That Yaakov who said, I am Esav, who kind of took the place of Esav in saying to his father, I am Esav, your eldest, in order to give me the blessings. At that moment, he kind of became her soulmate of Esav, this Yaakov. Now, Rachel, on the other hand, was destined to marry Yisrael. this part of Yaakov who is Yisrael, this higher individual who is on an even higher level. He's not the Yud Akav. He's not that part of the soul that he has that is the lowest part of the soul. But Li Rosh, he's the head. He's the tzaddik personality that he was. Rachel was destined to marry that Yisrael. And she did. She did end up marrying this Yisrael. Now, in this week's Torah portion, this is all like a kind of a prelude. In this week's Torah portion, we see Yaakov is meeting Esav. And as he comes to approach Esav is ready to fight him. He's coming with 400 men. He's angry with him. And Yaakov is trying to meet him and trying to pacify him. So on the first level, he's just trying to pacify him, to calm him down so he wouldn't actually fight with him. On a deeper level, as we're going to see, he's actually trying to pull out the energies of Esav and saying, let's work together. That didn't work. But on the basic level, he's just trying to pacify him. And the Torah tells us that it says Yaakov went with his 4 wives, right? He has the 4 wives, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, and his 11 children. Now, this is his 11 children, but the Torah had already told us that really he had 12 children. Binyamin was not yet born, but who was the 12th? He had 11 boys and Dina, 1 girl, Dina. And the commentary says, where was Dina? What do you mean he went with his 4 wives and his 11 children? Where was Dina? His 12th daughter, his 12th child, who was a daughter. And the commentaries tell us Yaakov hid Dina because he knew he was coming to meet Esav, and Dina was beautiful, and he didn't want Esav to see Dina and maybe want to take Dina as Esav's wife. And what's incredible about this is we're told that Yaakov was punished for this. Yaakov was punished for hiding Dina because Dina had the ability of raising Esav, of possibly helping Esav to really actualize his great potential of what he had, but instead he hid him from him. He didn't want to give his daughter to Esav.
Well, wasn't he supposed to protect his daughter?
So that's what I was thinking, like, shouldn't you be protecting your daughter? Seems like it, but it seems like he misjudged what Dina's potential was, that Dina could really have completely, he was scared, he didn't realize Dina's abilities, or he didn't want to see it, but really had Dina married Esav, she would have been able to rectify him and rectify his children. How do we see this? Because according to one commentary, Dina married Shimon, who rescued her from Shechem, but according to another commentary, she married Eov from the book of Job, and you hear about all the sufferings of this man. This man was a non-Jew, and he suffered terribly. He converted to Judaism, and it was his wife, according to the commentaries, was Dina. And they say, look at Dina, how she was able to take this non-Jew and bring him to become such a righteous individual. Even with all his suffering, he never questioned God. He never went against God, never rebelled against God. If Dina was able to do this with this person who was just a regular non-Jew, how much more would she have been able to do this to Esav, who was the son of Yitzchak and Rivka, such holy people? And if he had done that, the world would have been a very different world. So how do we see that Dina was able to actually do that she had that strength within her? So interestingly, it says in this week's Torah portion that when Yaakov reaches Shechem, it says, Vatetse Dina. Dina goes out. She goes out to explore the daughters of the land. And when she's out conversing with the daughters of the land, then that's when Shechem sees her and takes her and kidnaps her and then rapes her. Now, when she goes out to see the daughters of the land, what was she really trying to do? She was trying to exert her influence, just like we know Abraham and Sarah used to go out into the people of the land. They tried to show the people of the land the ideas of monotheism and teach them godliness and purity. What was Dina going out? It wasn't just going out to converse with the girls of the country. She was trying to influence them in a positive way. Dina was a very outgoing personality, and it was this outgoing personality who was very confident in her abilities who went out to try to convince the girls of the land, to speak to them, to lift them up, to give them some morality, to teach them something. And when she went out, this is what happened to her. Now, it's very interesting because when you look at that commentary, Vatetse Dina, it sounds like this was a negative thing that she did, according to some commentaries say this. This was immodest of her, that she went out. The whole idea of Vatetse Dina, her outgoingness, was a negative thing. It's not what a Jewish girl is supposed to be. She's supposed to be more modest. And Kol Gvuda Bas Melech Panima, the honor of the daughter of the king, is inwards. And here she was going out. But fascinatingly, the Lubavitcher Rebbe does not look at it in that way at all. He sees it as a very tremendous positive quality of Dina. And how does he see this? Rashi says, Vatetse Dina, Dina goes out to the daughters of the land, and Rashi says, Dina went out just like her mother went out. Her mother, Leah, was a very outgoing, Vatetse, she was an outgoing personality, and she went out, and Dina is going out just like her mother went out, and that's why the commentaries have this saying, like mother, like daughter, just like the mother, so is the daughter. Just like Dina was outgoing, she was outgoing just like her mother, Leah. Now, where was Leah so outgoing? When do we see that Leah was outgoing? When do we see that Leah went out? So interestingly, we see that Leah went out in last week's Torah portion when it says Reuven, Leah had a son her oldest son was Reuven, and Reuven saw that Leah was not as loved as Rachel was. And Reuven was out in the field one day, and he sees these mandrake plants, a kind of plant that helps with fertility. It makes you more fertile. And he brings this plant to his mother so she should have it. And Rachel, who at this point had no children at all, Leah already had quite a few children, Leah sees that Reuven is giving his mother these mandrake plants, and Leah says, oh, can I have them? I want them. I want them so that maybe I can become fertile. Can I get them from you? And Leah is kind of upset because here her son is giving her this present, and Rachel has she's the favorite of Yaakov, at least let me have what my son is giving me, kind of a thing. But she says to Rachel, I'll give you these mandrakes if you let me spend the night tonight with Yaakov. It was Rachel's turn to spend the night with Yaakov. She says, take these mandrakes, and tonight it will be my turn instead to spend with Yaakov. And Rachel agrees. Rachel says, sure, give me the mandrakes and you get Yaakov tonight. Okay, that's how it was done in those days.
It's not worth the proof.
No, we're there. So then what happens? It says Leah gets all dressed up beautifully and goes out to meet Yaakov on his way home. At the end of the day, he's with all the sheep, right? He's a shepherd. At the end of the day, he's coming home. And she goes out to meet him, and she says, come to my tent because tonight I have you. I got the privilege of having you. And this is where it says, Vatetse Dina, Vatetse Leah, that Leah goes out. Where did she go out? She went out to meet her husband, all dressed up, in order to lure him to her tent. And it was that night that she became pregnant with Zvulun. And the commentaries see that time when she went out as very praiseworthy. They say Leah went out. She was so excited to spend the time with her husband, And this is where you see, by the way, how intimacy is looked at in Judaism as not something degradable or something negative, but this is something that's so holy, so beautiful. Leah went out to greet her husband, and this is such a beautiful mitzvah. She was so excited and went beautifully to see her husband. This is seen as something so praiseworthy, and therefore she had Zvulun, who is known to be a very big Torah scholar from all the children of her children. So her going out, her outgoingness of Leah, going out to meet her husband, Vatetze Leah, was seen in a very positive light. And so the Rebbe says, when we're talking about Dina, and we're saying Dina is just like her mother, just like Leah went out, so Dina goes out, that can't be saying a negative thing. We were talking so positively about Leah, that Leah went out to greet her husband, to have intimate relations with him, to greet him for it. And this was something that was a mitzvah. This was something so positive. And as a result, she had Zvulun, who was a tribe who was full of Torah study. So when Dina is compared to her mother, it wasn't her immodesty. It was a beautiful quality, her outgoingness to go out and influence in a positive way the girls of the land. This was not a negative thing that she was doing. Now, why then did this whole episode happen that she was abducted and then raped? So the commentaries explain this, that this was punishment for Yaakov. This was Yaakov's punishment. It was not Dina. I mean, Dina, obviously, whenever anyone is punished or whenever anything happens, this was obviously the fate that Dina had to have. This was the fate that she had to have because this was what her soul was all about. But it says Yaakov was punished for not giving Dina to his brother Esav, because Esav would have been rectified through Dina. And God is kind of saying to him, you didn't want to rectify Esav. So now look, she's falling to Shechem. And later on, she's actually marrying Eav, who she does rectify. But you didn't want to give her to your own brother. She had those spiritual abilities to rectify Esav, but you withheld her from it. So in this way, you're going to see punishment or a natural consequence of it is that Dina is going to fall. This is her destiny. Dina's destiny is not to live the life of the tzaddik, but to live the life of the Baal Teshuvah, that life that Leah was supposed to lead, that life that her mother was supposed to lead, because Dina is very much the child of Leah. She represents what Leah was. What was Leah? Leah was somebody who was supposed to marry Esav and rectify him, but Leah protested. Leah prayed. She prayed and cried her eyes out because she didn't want that destiny, so she ended up with Yaakov. But her daughter, who has that same spiritual profile of outgoingness and this ability to influence people in a positive way, she was supposed to marry. She had the ability of marrying Esav, but you withheld her from Esav, and she was able to really rectify Esav. But this was not what you were willing to do. So Dina is going to go through her own life, through her own ups and downs of life in another way, but she could have done it in a way that she could have rectified Esav. Now, are we clear so far? There's a lot of ins and outs here, right?
Yeah.
So like the plot thickens. Now, one more thing that we realize about Dina is it says when Leah was pregnant with Dina, Leah prayed to God. Why was she called her Dina? It says, Rashi says there, because Dina is from the word dun, which means judgment. Leah made a judgment on herself. And she said, I already have 6 children, 6 sons. The 2 maidservants are each having 4 children. That's already 10 children. Yaakov is supposed to have 12 tribes. If this child that is going to be born is going to be a male, that means I'm going to have 7 sons plus the 4 children of the maidservants. That means Rachel will only be able to have 1 child. Let her at least have what the maidservants have. Let her at least have 2 children. And so she prayed to God, and again we see Leah's tremendous power of prayer. She judged herself and said, I don't want this child to be a girl, please God, let her be a boy, so that at least Rachel can have 2 children, which she ended up having, Yosef and Binyamin.
How did she know before that he was supposed to have 12?
Apparently it was like a prophecy that they, like again, these women were prophets, so they had this prophetic knowledge. How did she know that she was supposed to marry Esav? And like they had a certain prophecy and prophetic knowledge that was known, that Yaakov was known to have, he was going to have the 12 tribes of Israel. Yeah, that's a good question though. So Dina, Leah's praying to God that this fetus that's inside of her should be changed. She doesn't know what it is, but if it's a boy, let it be changed. And we're told that she actually had a fetus that was a boy inside of her. It was a male fetus. And God listened to her prayers and changed it into a female fetus. And that was Dina, who was born as this girl. And who was her counterpart of who Rachel would have? Yosef. So in other words, the fetus of Rachel and Leah kind of were exchanged, that instead of Yosef being born to Leah, he was born to Rachel, and Dina was born to Leah. So Dina and Yosef both had a certain spiritual counterparts of one another. And how do we see this? It says that Yosef, it says, V'haya beis Yaakov la'esh, u'beis Yosef laheva. That beis Yaakov, that Yaakov is compared to fire, and Yosef is compared to this stream of fire, this like fire that shoots out. Ubeis Esav lakash, and Esav is considered like straw, meaning Yosef has a certain power of destroying Esav. He has a certain power of this fire that can completely destroy Esav. When Yaakov was in Lavan's house, he stayed and stayed and stayed until Yosef was born. It was when Yosef was born that he says, now I feel like I'm strong enough spiritually to encounter my brother Esav. Now I'll be able to actually meet Esav and win him. Up until then, he was scared. When he had Yosef, he says, now it's time. Yosef is born. He has the spiritual strength to fight Esav. Now I'm ready to go and meet my brother. So what Yosef was able to do as a masculine fighter, he was able to defeat Esav. Dina had this characteristic as well, but as a feminine characteristic of not fighting Esav, but transforming him. She would have been able to marry him and bring out the best in him in transforming him. But Yaakov didn't want that, and that's why it says Yaakov was punished. He hid her so that Esav couldn't see her, and that's why he was punished, that she fell into the hands of Shechem instead. Now, at the end of this week's Torah portion, so we see that Yaakov does meet with Esav. He meets him with the 400 men. And what Yaakov is trying to do when he sees Esav is he's trying to join forces with Esav. He's trying to say, Esav, look at me, like I'm no longer that little brother that, stole your blessings. Look at where I've developed. Look at my family. I have a family now. Look at me. I have 20 years I was working with Lavan the swindler, and I've accomplished so much. I've learned the ways of the world. Look at who I've become. Join forces with me. Let's work together. Let's work together to bring the peace to the world in a positive way. We don't have to fight anymore. Let's work together. But Esav was not ready for that. He was not ready for that partnership. What Yaakov was really saying to him is, let's cause the redemption of the world now. Let's work Esav and Yaakov together, and let's find the redemption of the world. Yitzchak, my father, saw you have a tremendous potential, but that tremendous potential, Rivka understood, has to be used with me, only with me helping you and coordinating it and orchestrating it, because if you're on your own, you're going to just go to the lowest levels, the deepest depravity possible. You're not going to use your high potential for good. You're going to use it only for negativity. But let's work together, and together I will work with you, bring out the highest potential that you have, and I, with my Torah knowledge and the ways that I am working, will bring out the best, and we can actually actualize Mashiach's coming. But Esav did not want. And he saw that Esav was not ready for that. And the world was not ready for that. And the world was not ready for Mashiach to come at that time. And he said, and that's why he says to Esav, you go ahead. You go ahead on the journey. I can't come with you right now. I have young children. I have nursing mothers. I'm not able to join you. I have to go slower, because the ways of the road is going to be too harsh. You go ahead of me, and I'll meet you in Seir, which is where Esav actually lived. And we don't see that Yaakov ever met him in Seir, in Esav's place. So this is a reference really for the coming of Mashiach, when Yaakov and Esav are going to finally work together. When the two forces, the cosmic forces of Yaakov and the forces of Esav, are going to come together in the time period of Mashiach. But until that time period, Yaakov is saying, go ahead of me, because we're not ready yet. The world's not ready yet. You're not ready yet. However, we are now in a time period that is very, very much at that precipice of Mashiach's coming. And we are seeing how the world has been rectified through a tremendous amount of levels. And now we're at the place where we're actually seeing, as you said at the beginning of this class, so many miracles coming out, so many things that have been predicted coming out. And the forces of Esav hopefully have been already rectified. As the Rebbe explained, they've been rectified. And now there's still the negativity that has to just fall by the wayside, but we're at that place now. And the way that we get there, it says at the end, the Rebbe says at the end of this parsha, is when we realize that Esav is just there in order to help us to get to where we're supposed to get. When we give Esav power on his own, when we say Esav has this power and he can destroy me, no. Everything is in God's hands. God is orchestrating our journey. God is telling us where we need to go. Our journey is set, and there's a cosmic road that we need to follow. Esav is there only to bring the world to where it needs to go, to the completion that it needs to go. Don't give Esav any powers that he does not have. And by this we mean physical Esav, the nations of the world, the nations that are around us. We need to realize that everything is in God's hands. God is holding us. God is taking care of us. God is helping us to get to where we are at. And the Esavs of the world also mean those temptations that we have within us, those forces that we have inside of us, those negativities, the power of negativity. Don't give Esav any power. Realize that Esav is just there in order to get you on your journey, to get you to your completion, to get you to follow the road and the path that you need to get to, so that we can all get to that time period of cosmic redemption, of Yemais HaMashiach cosmically, as well as personal and collective redemption that we all need to get to become the complete individuals that we need to get to. And that is the message of this week's Parsha.
Thank you.